It is a heartbreaking case out of Lynwood, California. A little boy's body found inside a cooler packed with ice. Prosecutors say 8-year-old Isaiah suffered months of horrific abuse before his death at the hands of the very people who were supposed to protect him, his own mother, father, and grandmother. And now all three are charged with murder and torture. But when it came time to face a judge, two of them didn't even show up initially. The only one who did, Isaiah's mother, hiding her face behind manila folders in court. We are going to break down what happened, the charges they're facing, and more with an expert attorney to help make sense of how something so tragic could happen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, real quick, not to take away from this story in any way, but the truth is we can bring you stories like this. We can do a deep dive on stories like this because of the support that we get from our sponsors. And I know this is a 180, but I actually think you're really going to love this. We have this brand called Wild Grain. So Wild Grain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads and seasonal pastries and fresh pastas. And Wild Grain products, they bake in 25 minutes or less. And that doesn't mean that they're skimping out on quality. No, because unlike the store-bought products, Wild Grain, they use a slow fermentation process that's easier on your belly and it's richer in nutrients and antioxidants. And also, their boxes, fully customizable. They have a big selection of seasonal and limited time products. And if you got dietary restrictions, it's not a problem. They even have gluten-free boxes and plant-based boxes. Wild Grain has this autumn selection right now, apple pie bites, pumpkin spiced English muffins. They are really, really great. So this fall, treat yourself and your loved ones to warm sourdough breads and seasonal baked goods, all from Wild Grain. And rumor has it they also have these apple cider donuts and these pumpkin cinnamon biscuits. You're definitely going to want to get them before they sell out. So from limited time, Wild Grain is offering our listeners $30 off of the first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/sidebar to start your subscription. That's right, free croissants in every box and $30 off of your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/sidebar. That's wildgrain.com/sidebar, or you can use promo code sidebar at checkout. Do not miss out on their seasonal products. A little boy's body found inside a cooler filled with ice in a Lynwood, California apartment complex. Prosecutors say 8-year-old Isaiah suffered unimaginable abuse at the hands of the very people who were supposed to be protecting him. His own mother, father, and grandmother. All three. They're now charged with murder, torture, and child abuse resulting in death. Now, initially, when the first court dates rolled around on October 31st, the father, Daniel Monzon, refused to appear. The grandmother, Carcamo Zarceno, claimed she was too sick. So you only had Isaiah's mother, Luckie Harrison, who appeared in court for her scheduled appearance. The problem with that was, hid her face from cameras behind these manila folders that were held up by her defense attorney. Now, since then, both Monzon and Zarceno, they have made their first court appearances, but the part that is even more chilling is that investigators say learning basic details about Isaiah, it has not been easy. It has been challenging. The boy may have never been enrolled in school. Officials are still trying to confirm his true age, his identity, because the people accused of killing him are the same ones who should have had all of his records. Police believe he's 8 years old, but they don't know for sure. So we're going to break down what happened inside that courtroom, what these charges mean, how a child could seemingly endure months, maybe years of abuse without anyone stepping in if these allegations are true. The story begins in late October. We're inside of an apartment complex in Lynwood, California. It's a small community just south of Los Angeles. And in the morning of Tuesday, October 28th, neighbors in an apartment complex on Euclid Avenue, they started to worry. They hadn't seen the little boy who lived there in days. And when someone finally picked up the phone and called the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, deputies had no idea what they were about to find. When officers arrived at around 8:30 p.m., they were led into the home, and what they found stopped them in their tracks. Inside the apartment was a large cooler that was packed with ice, and inside that cooler, the body of a young child. He was identified as Isaiah H., believed to be 8 years old. According to investigators, Isaiah hadn't even died that day. Prosecutors say he had already succumbed to injuries 4 days earlier on October 24th, and that his death was the result of months of abuse inside of that very home. Within hours, the three family members, they were taken into custody again. 25-year-old Destiny Luckie Harrison, Isaiah's mother, 25-year-old Daniel Alberto Monzon, his father, and 45-year-old Anna Carcamo Zarceno, his paternal grandmother. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office charged all three with murder, torture, and child abuse resulting in death. The cause of death, by the way, has not yet been released. The charging document lays out in stark language what prosecutors say happened. It reads, on or between October 23, 2025 and October 24, 2025, in the County of Los Angeles, the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony, was committed by Destiny Luckie Harrison, Daniel Alberto Monzon, and Anna Carcamo Zarceno, who did unlawfully and with malice aforethought murder Isaiah H., a human being. Prosecutors also claim that Monzon and Zarceno acted as accessories after the fact, suggesting they may have tried to cover up what happened. But here's where it gets even worse. According to the criminal complaint reviewed by local media, the alleged abuse didn't start just days before the body was discovered. It dates all the way back to at least April of this year, suggesting months of suffering before Isaiah's death. In a statement, District Attorney Nathan J. Hochman called this case horrific, saying the horrific abuse that Isaiah endured is made even worse by the fact that, as alleged, it was at the hands of the people who were meant to love and protect him. Our office is committed to ensuring that those responsible are held fully accountable for their actions and that justice will be secured for Isaiah. Now, meanwhile, detectives, they were still learning more about the child's life, or, in some ways uncovering the lack of information, right? They said there were no school records showing that Isaiah had ever attended classes. The DA's office added that even confirming his exact age has been a challenge because both parents, the two people who could identify him, they're now accused of killing him. Can they really be trusted? After the discovery, three other children, ages 16, 14, and 9 months, were taken from that same apartment by the LA County Department of Children and Family Services. And prosecutors said that at least one of them was a witness in this case. Then came Halloween, October 31st, 2025, arraignment day in Compton. All three defendants were due in court. But when the judge called the case, only one showed up. According to officials, the father, Monzon, refused to appear. His mother, the grandmother here, Zarceno, claimed she was too sick. And then you have this mother, Miss Harrison, did come to court. The moment she stepped in front of the cameras, became one of the most talked about images in the case. Because as reporters watched, Harrison's defense attorney held up these manila folders in front of her face, shielding her from view. The mother, accused of torturing and killing her own son, sitting in court, completely hidden behind a wall of paper. Each defendant's bail was set at $2 million, and if convicted, they face up to 32 years to life in prison. The case is being prosecuted by Assistant Head Deputy DA Jonathan Hatami, who's handled some of LA's toughest and most emotional child abuse cases. He said his office is committed to ensuring that justice is done for Isaiah and that those responsible are, quote, held fully accountable for their actions. So for now, the three remain behind bars as investigators continue to piece together how a little boy could have suffered so much for so long without anyone stepping in to save him, right? If these allegations are true, how is that possible? And as the story unfolds, there is one haunting question that remains. How many people knew something was wrong and said nothing? So I want to talk about this more, and I want to bring on criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Josh Corman. Josh, thanks for taking the time. This is a tough case. You're hearing this, a child accused, where you have not just one, but several caregivers, family members, accused of abusing this small child. I mean, the people who were supposed to protect him for a long period of time, this abuse went on. That's what the allegation is. It's kind of hard to kind of wrap your head around this. Is this something we see a lot? It's one thing to say that it's a babysitter or it's a father or a mother, but to see this many family members accused of being a part of this, is that unusual to you?
I think the facts of this case are unusual, especially when you're talking about, a victim being found in a cooler, with ice. Sounds like several days after the child was deceased. As far as who is charged in this, I think most of the time we do see that it is someone who is in charge of caring for a child, whether that be a parent, a grandparent, or mom's boyfriend. Those are the kind of things that we do often see when we see these child abuse murder cases.
And what do they just blame each other? One says, "Oh, I didn't know what was going on. This is the person who put the child in the cooler. I was nervous to come forward. I thought my life was threatened." And I know they're innocent until proven guilty, but I mean, is that really what we see here?
I think that's oftentimes what you see, especially when you have multiple people charged in this, is multiple people are going to be pointing the finger at each other. And during the course of this investigation and during the course of the litigation, the attorneys that are representing them are going to be talking to the prosecutor, and that very well may end up being what happens, where one of the parents or one of the guardians is ultimately the person who is fully prosecuted, while the other one or the other two may end up cooperating to give some background or to give some evidence. Or like you said, I guess in a trial, they could just be pointing the finger at each other and say, it wasn't me, he was doing this. Could be the mother saying that she was the victim of domestic violence and she was also being abused. And, there's all kinds of things we can, try to think of depending on what these people have to say and what the defenses may be in this particular case. But those are the kinds of things that we often see in these situations.
And definitely a cooperating co-defendant would definitely be useful for a prosecution, particularly a prosecution like this. But before we even get into the case, I'm sorry, I just got to back up. The images from court of Destiny Harrison hiding behind the manila folders that were apparently put up by her defense attorney, I can't say I've seen that myself too many times. I mean, what does it say about a defendant's awareness of the case? Does it give you a mindset of how they're feeling? Does it give you, is it consciousness of guilt, as we say? And by the way, a defendant's attorney helping them do that, is that strange to you?
It was strange. What we normally see is, when someone goes through, the perp walk, right? You see people walking into the courthouse, and oftentimes you do see them with, a hood over their head, a jacket over their head, trying to cover themselves, from the media. I don't know that I've ever seen something like that in a courtroom or a defense attorney holding up files trying to cover her client's face. But to each your own. I guess she thought that was necessary or was needed in this. I think it was also strange, the little bit that I read about it, it sounds like the other two defendants did not come into the courtroom.
No.
And I don't believe that was the fault of the courthouse personnel. It sounds like they were either refusing or there were some issues with them actually appearing in court themselves. So it sounds like all three of them wanted to hide their faces and hide their identity.
And by the way, I mean, if a potential future jury member were to see the media reporting about her hiding her face, I'm sure they would be asked about that. I'm sure they would ask what they knew about the case, but it just doesn't, it's not a good look, right? It really looks bad. And I think it's an interesting aspect of this case because there's a lot of weird things going on here. Aside from kind of a lack of information we have about what this alleged abuse might have looked like or what may have happened, you have a child that we have very little information about, right? We don't really know the age. This child may never have been enrolled in school. Officials don't know the official age or identity. Is that different to you? I mean, how shocking is that?
I can't say that I've ever seen that before. I mean, it makes sense that if the defendants charged, are the parents, and the parents, invoke their rights or don't speak or ask to have an attorney present without making any statement, that it may be somewhat difficult for them to get some basic information. But you're right, a child who it sounds like is 8 years old and should have been in school. And it sounds like there's two other teenagers that were living in the house at the time. It does seem very strange that they don't have more information on the identity of this child, of this 8-year-old child.
Yeah, and let me focus upon that for a second. If you have a child who wasn't enrolled in school, is that evidence of neglect? Is that evidence of abuse? Is that evidence that could be used in court to document what the pattern of care looked like here, or the lack of care?
Well, I mean, it is illegal not to send your child to school. I mean, that is
right.
Truancy is a law, and you're exactly right. Under the neglect statutes, educational neglect is certainly a form of child abuse and neglect. So I think those are things that could certainly be brought out or fleshed out in a trial, or certainly in the discovery process. And it very well could be that this child may have been abused for months or years, and that very well could explain why this child doesn't show up in any school records. Or, like I said, it could be that the child had been in school, had been in school last week, but law enforcement or the DA's office just had not disclosed that information for whatever reason. But you're exactly right. I think there are so many issues and so many kind of red flags or so many oddities in this case, notwithstanding the fact that it's just a horrible crime anytime we see a child victim.
You know, this is a heartbreaking case, and you wonder, I wish it doesn't go to trial in one sense, because you don't even want to have to prosecute a case like this, expose jury members to the evidence in a case like this. It's going to be very, very difficult. But there's also this other aspect where you think, the witnesses who will have to testify, because 3 other kids were taken into protective custody, and it's being reported that maybe one of them may have been a witness. Maybe one or more may have been a witness to what happened here, and them having to testify about this, that's another chilling aspect of this case. I wonder how that affects the investigation. I wonder how that affects understanding what may have happened. And yes, you will, there may be a situation where you have a child who takes the stand, right?
It is, and I think it's a concern for both sides. You're right. For a prosecutor, that's something that they're always going to be thinking about, is when they have to present evidence to prove their case in court. You know, how much are you going to rely on a child to testify, to give some of these details, or if it gets to the point where there's negotiations or a plea deal against another parent or a grandparent, what kind of deal do you want to give them in exchange for their cooperation to go after one of the other parents or parents. So I think for a prosecutor, that's certainly going to be an issue that they're going to have to deal with. But then you're right, for the defense, there's only so much that a jury can handle hearing before they just kind of give up on the facts of the case. And it's just too much for them to bear, really looking at the pieces of evidence, which as a defense attorney is what you really want a jury looking at. So for the jury, it may just be that this is, it's just too extreme. And this is something that you're going to do whatever you can to try to get some kind of plea agreement worked out for your client, because you do not want a jury to ever get to see the evidence or hear some of the things that may come out if the case went to trial.
And I wanted to ask you about these charges here, because all 3 defendants, they face murder, torture, and child abuse resulting in death charges. Can you break down what those charges mean, why those specific charges that they're facing?
So I think oftentimes when you have these child abuse cases, there'll be a murder charge because obviously the child is deceased. Felony murder means that someone died as a result of an underlying felony. So that could be from a lot of different things. It could be, a carjacking gone wrong and someone died in it, or a house set on fire for arson and someone died. Those are things where maybe the death was not an intended consequence. However, the underlying felony was, and so that qualifies as felony murder. So it could be easier for a prosecutor sometimes to prove felony murder than an underlying just murder case itself. And I believe they were also charging this with accessory after the fact, which again goes to the grandmother and the father, that there was something that they did afterwards that added another charge to it. And
right.
Whether that's some kind of a fake alibi or trying to hide someone out, or what we see with this evidence of a cooler, for whatever reason, that is a charge that got added, which is certainly a much lower charge. I think it only carries maybe up to 3 years in prison. But for whatever reason, the prosecutors have decided to add that charge and charge that in addition on the father and the grandmother.
I just want to clarify something. When you have a case like this where it's built upon prolonged abuse over a period of time, how do prosecutors do that? How do they piece it together, a timeline that can prove that? If maybe, what can be discovered from a house, a scene that would suggest, or the autopsy itself, where you can say, hey, listen, we can prove that this child suffered abuse for a long period of time, and it was that abuse that caused the death? Does that become difficult? How do you piece that together as a prosecutor?
So I think it can be difficult, and that's where the medical examiner comes in. And at this point in time, I don't know that the medical examiner's report had been issued to the prosecutor, but certainly in doing the autopsy, there are injuries that they will find that they can say are healing injuries, or they can give a rough estimate about how long ago that injury occurred based on, like if a broken bone, for instance, or a broken leg. They could tell if that was something that was fresh or if that's something that had been months ago or even years ago based on the healing stage of it. So sometimes the testimonies of the medical examiners is actually quite amazing for the information they can give, although it's not like what we see on TV and Law and Order, where they can give an idea that, oh, this person was killed within the last 12 hours or something like that. Most of the time that's not something that they're able to do at all. But in these child abuse cases, looking at the injuries, whether it's to the liver or the spleen or broken bones, it is kind of amazing the amount of detail and information that they're able to see when they do an autopsy, or even if a child is not deceased, from CT scans and X-rays and MRIs. The injuries that they're able to find and give information about is crucial to a prosecutor, because you're right. Otherwise, there really isn't any way to I guess, present that evidence to a jury unless you have another witness. And again, that comes back to, the other child that was in the house or one of these co-defendants testifying and giving up information about what had been going on and what specifically and who did what.
And Josh, I want to go back to something that I mentioned before we began the interview. So while you have these defendants, while you have Destiny Luckie Harrison and Anna Carcamo Zarceno, they're scheduled for arraignment on November 20th. You have Daniel Alberto Monzon on November 25th, their case moving forward. I go to the question that I had before. Is it possible there were more people out there that knew something was going on and did not say anything? I wonder about that in a lot of these kinds of child abuse cases or alleged child abuse cases, and what we should be thinking about there.
I think you're exactly right. In all these child abuse cases and neglect cases that we see, it seems that there always should be more people that either knew what was going on or should have known what was going on or should have made some kind of a report, whether that was a DCS hotline call or something. We're all mandatory reporters under the law. So anytime you see something or suspect something, we should be contacting Children's Services to do a welfare check or find out. It sounds like that's how this case finally came to fruition, is that someone made a welfare check and law enforcement got involved. So, in this, I don't know enough about their family to say, but it seems that other people, other neighbors, other family members, whether church or school or other people in the community, certainly should have known something or seen something, as well as the teenagers that were in the house. So you would hope that anytime something certainly gets to this level, this bad, that someone would step in and do something and make a report. But you're right, in countless cases that you and I have talked about or that I have seen in court, it is kind of a travesty that people don't come forward and try to do something to help before it reaches the level of either serious child abuse or death, like in this case.
Josh Corman, thanks for taking the time. I know this is not an easy one to go over, but appreciate your perspective, as always.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.